Namaskar.
Namaskar.
I, Gaurav Tiwari, welcome you all for this session of Kahi Suni. And today we will talk to Rajni ji. Rajni Muralidhar ji is the author of Ulupi story in the anthology called Arya. This is an anthology of remarkable Vedic women, and we believe that it is an important task to tell people about the remarkable women from our ancient past, because of the popular narrative that women were suppressed without any agency, which is something which cannot be further from the truth. And it is important that people should know the truth, and keeping that in mind, this session of Kahisuni is dedicated to another character from Mahabharat. She is a remarkable woman. She was someone who was a widow, who married Arjun out of her own will, out of her own choice, and most likely she faced a lot of what you can say. Her family probably would not have agreed to it, considering the Arjuna's equation with the Nagas throughout the epic. So it's an interesting character, and we have Rajni ji here to talk about the character. Namaste, Rajni ji.
Namaste. Thank you,
So,
Gaurav for inviting me here. It's my pleasure to come to this show today. I should first of all thank you and also Indika and Shivkumar ji for making this all real for me.
So it's very much real. I have the book in my hand, and I have read the stories that all of you have put together, and I have thoroughly enjoyed reading those stories. So, first thing, before we go ahead and talk about Ulupi, let us talk about yourself, and you must tell the audience, what brought you into writing stories, and what made you an author, because you have a different background, right? So let us touch upon that, and then maybe we can talk more about Ulupi.
Uh, so I actually am pinching myself to feel that this is real because, like you said, I am not from the literary world. I trained to be a software engineer and I worked for more than a decade there. When my children were born, I quit my job and to take care of them. And when I was raising them, I spent a lot of time with children's books for over a decade, and I always felt that I also could write while reading, but like we all do, we just postpone whatever we feel that we should do. uh, for 10 years I did nothing about it, but it was my son's 10th birthday and I had to find a gift. Then I thought, why not write a story, because I could find nothing that could please him. so I wrote this story, which in my mother tongue Kannada, and also I translated it to English, and I presented it to him. He was 10 then, like I said, and enjoyed it very much. My daughter, who was then 5, also enjoyed it to my surprise. So I thought, okay, two children like it, so I must take it forward, and I started writing. So that is how my journey with story writing began, very accidentally. And then I saw that my skills were only through reading books, so it wasn't enough. So I was looking for opportunities, and I came across this in the internet, this call for submissions for an anthology that Indica had put out. So I decided that I should write about the character Ulupi, and I sent it to them. To my surprise, I got selected, and so here I am today, um, writing
So,
the published book. Yeah,
great, congratulations,
thank
and hopefully you will write many more stories. And we believe that there is a shortage of good literature for children, and hopefully you will contribute to that even more,
you.
because
Yes,
your
yes.
journey to becoming an author started from your journey to become a mother. so that maybe you will be the best suited person to write stories for children. And
Yes.
we hope to hear more about these stories, and we hope to read more. Now, coming to the Ulupi character, and you said that when you got the call for these anthology, you decided to write about Ulupi. So my question is, why did you want to write about Ulupi? There are many other remarkable women that are present in our scriptures.
Yeah.
So why Ulupi?
Okay, the first thought I got when I saw this call for submissions was that I should write some a positive story, because we all know that there is a dearth of positive stories, motivational stories, inspirational stories, and then of course all the women in Mahabharata, Ramayana, and even our Puranas, they are all women who have positive influence only. There's nothing negative about them. There are no negative characteristics, I would say. Everybody would suit to write a story. But what I found unique was about Ulupi. She's a mother, of course. Many of the characters are also mothers. Uh, but in a situation where the society partly did not accept her son, and the father of her son, she chose to handle this problem in a very different way. And she chose to raise the son of another woman who happens to be the wife of her husband also. So this was very unique. I thought, what a way to handle this situation. She, in the face of all the difficulties that she had, she was so generous. She chose to give rather than to ask for help. When she gave, she automatically got. So I think that is a big lesson for us, even in the modern world. So when we give, is we automatically get. So I think this quality of Ulupi, I thought was very important to show. So I chose her as a character, and also we've seen that she comes and goes in the Mahabharata, in different parvas. Her character is not so well constructed in the Mahabharata epic itself, like all other minor characters of women. So I thought she deserves a full story, which will actually showcase the strength of her character. So that is why I chose her as the central character in my story.
So interesting choice, I must say, because and the interesting aspect that you have decided to highlight about Lupi, because even people who would have read Mahabharata, or who would have probably watched it on television, they might not know much about Ulupi, the character itself. And if they know, they would know her as Arjuna's wife. And maybe some people who know Mahabharata even more would probably know her as Iravan's mother.
Yeah,
But raising another woman's child is an aspect which not many people would be familiar with, because even that part comes like a passing mention, and it's not
correct.
probed further into in the epic itself.
Yes.
Then there is an aspect of the hostility she would have faced while raising the son of Arjun in Naga world. Would this her going to the other woman and helping her raise the child be an escape from that hostility for her, or it would have been, how would you think about it? Maybe
I
she was
think
trying to run away from the hostility at home, and she
no, no,
found
no.
a good place here.
No, in fact, her father was supportive. It was, I think, her brother who had. Yeah, I do not reveal the whole story, but
No, no, you need not.
so I would not say that she was running away. I think women in those days and even in these days, we understand ourselves, each other well, um, and the best support one can get is from another woman in a difficult situation. And in those days, at least, they were. I don't think there was any animosity between women who were married to the same man. So at that time, even then, you can see in the story she hesitates a bit, but um, because you never know. So, but you can see that they gel very well. with each other, and she derives strength by raising the son of another woman, and in turn, the other woman also benefits. Chitrangada also benefits from the relationship. So I don't think
And
she
even
was
Arjuna as well.
originally. Yeah, of course,
Arjuna
he's far
also
away, but
benefits from
I
that
think in the
relationship.
end, he is the beneficiary. Is they know the bigger picture? I would say the women of those days knew the bigger picture, and that is why she chose to do this in the situation. It was probably natural in those days to seek out help from another woman, and in this case, she didn't have anybody from the Naga world. So I mean, probably, and she thought Chitrangada was the best. And she also saw another son in Babrovahana. So she chose to do that. And one other thing I would like to mention here is these days when we see maybe television serials, books, or anything, women are generally stereotyped. For example, the scheming daughter-in-law or the unhappy mother-in-law or whatever. In the case of in-laws or co-sisters and these kind of things. But I think when we see from our epics, there's nothing like that. We are probably overdoing this thing and creating more negative in our world. And that's one reason, especially, I chose that their relation should be on good terms. Of course, in the
So,
epic also it is, and I wanted to highlight that so that we read a story where two women are in a good relationship and it makes us feel good. After all, we are energy beings and we carry what we read, even though we don't estimate how much it can influence. I think it is of great influence. What we read, what we see, what we hear is what makes us to a large extent. So that is why the motivation to tell a positive story.
Interesting point you had made about women's representation in our epics. And one interesting point that I want to highlight, which you touched upon, and maybe our audience would have missed, there are not a single negative woman in our epics, right? Like
Yes,
Mahabharat, if you look at Mahabharat, you will find men who are scheming, who are evil, who are bad, who are good, but not a single woman you can say that this was a bad person, right? You
that's right.
start from Gandhari or Kunti or Madri, anyone,
And
even
even Duryodhana's
the
wife for
smaller
that matter.
characters. Yeah, even Duryodhana's wife. So the thing is that even Dushala, Duryodhana's sister, right? Even the characters who are smaller characters in the whole epic, even they are shown as strong women with their own agency, with their own authority. And
Yes,
I believe that this reflects the society that Mahabharat is trying to
correct.
present to us.
Yes,
And this is in contrast with the society that we are trying to build around us. And the example of TV serials that you talked about, right?
yeah.
So,
The problem is, I
and this
think
can't be.
our human brains are by default attracted to negative things and are capable of remembering negative more than positive, which is for a reason, for evolution, for defending ourselves. So this point has been taken undue advantage of, and we are always making negative things so that people attract get their attention gets attracted to that. So unfortunately, this creates a negative world, which we have underestimated totally. I think this is bad, yeah. So we should
I
try to
mean,
change it.
in it's a welcome change that you have decided to tell a positive story, and you have decided to deliberately highlight the positive aspects, and maybe if there are some negative aspects, they have been touched upon but not been given undue attention just for the sake
Correct.
of creating a conflict, or just for the sake of trying to do, जैसे हिंदी में बोलते हैं ना, मिर्च मसाला लगाना. That
Mhm.
attempt you have not made, and it is a welcome change from the world where everybody is writing about Draupadi and Karna and having a romance and
Yeah.
everything, which is really wrong if you ask me, because as you said, you become what you aspire to be, right? If you are reading something which is giving rise to negative emotions inside you, you would become negative person maybe, and it would be very
Yeah.
slow for you to even notice, to be honest, right? You
Correct.
would
That
not
is the
even
problem.
realize that you are changing as a person but you are consuming. So it's a welcome change that you have written this story.
Yeah.
And if is there any aspect in your personal life that made you choose to write a story about positivity, or something that happened with you, some inspiring
Actually,
incident probably?
from of course life experiences, we all see conflicts. There is, it is not that we can escape from it. So conflicts are always there, and that is what makes a story interesting. But the thing is, how do we react to conflicts? Do we react positively, or do we actually treat ourselves as a victim of the situation? So we have a choice there. So once we treat ourselves as a victim of the situation, the person who is inflicting that problem onto us and creating bad situations for us becomes extremely negative. And then we, in our mind, actually blow it up slowly, and then we say, okay, this person is bad. And then because we are energy beings and we are connected in some way, even though we don't say it, the other person can feel it. We all know it. I think the people of those days already knew these things. So just thinking about the person bad in the mind is enough for the other person to know. That is why when we meet somebody and we don't get off to a good start, it is because we already have energies which are conflicting. So so if we keep on growing this in our mind, we keep making ourselves the victim of the situation and say, how can they do this to me? This is not good. And this goes on, and our actions are determined by how a victim would behave. So we are annoyed, we are distressed, we are crying, and these kind of things. So this multiplies and grows like a mountain, and finally it becomes so bad that we can't repair the relationship. But if we do the opposite, let's say there is a situation where we are not able to handle it, we just let it be. We, but the important thing is we should not judge the other person who is troubling us. Magically these things disappear. It's happened in my life also. So magically these conflicts get resolved. So even in this story I've tried to use it. Not always is Ulupi able to handle it the way she wants. It's not possible even for us in real life to handle these conflicts the exactly the way we want. But sometimes we have to let the situation be, and we have to take a stand, which is probably not that everybody is happy about. And in time it will get resolved or not resolved, but we have to accept those things. So in the end, how
So
we treat the conflict is what makes the story positive or negative. That's what I would say.
correct.
So yeah, the story can still be interesting with a conflict. The resolution which the protagonist adopts make it positive or negative. Whether he starts scheming against the person, whether he lets hate, greed, and all this take over him, or he reacts positively. I think that's what makes the story positive or negative. And the situations they faced and that situation we face are no different. We also have family conflicts. We also have a difficult situation. There are single mothers raising children. So in the end, we want our children to have a positive environment to live in. That is what our idea is, and that's what women of those days also aspired. So we can learn a lot from these stories. Is what I feel.
Uh, Great. I mean, it's a great message, and everybody should probably aspire to become a positive person by adopting positive thoughts and positive feelings, and maybe avoid some Sas Bahu serials while at it. Before we move on to the next question from my side, there is a question from an audience member. Let me ask that question. It is flashing on the screen. There is a famous Kannada film on Babruvahan starring Dr. Rajkumar. That movie has touched upon the story of Ulupi. So the question is, have you seen the movie, and has that movie influenced you or inspired you to write about the character?
Actually, I've seen the movie in my childhood. Honestly, I don't remember Ulupi's representation much from the movie. I know she's there in the battlefield. That is what is my memory of that movie. Other than that, I don't remember it clearly. But of course, she's in the battlefield somewhere. So that is one thing I
So
remember.
So that
So
brings to
I
the
would say
warrior aspect of the
correct,
character.
correct, correct. And her great influence on Babruahana is shown in this movie. That's one thing I remember. But I would not
So,
say it inspired me, but I have read the same story in Amar Chitrakatha, and that was a more recent memory, I would say. I would say, yeah,
so
I remember the movie from childhood.
So Babru Vahan was a character who managed to defeat Arjun, right? It's a rare
Yes,
feat which not many people can claim to have achieved. So
yeah,
that in itself shows that he was a formidable warrior,
yeah,
and he must have been trained by someone. He must have had that kind of upbringing, which made him the kind of warrior he became, and which gave him the ability to defeat Arjun while
yes.
there were many other aspects at play. Right, Arjun knew he was fighting his son and all that stuff is there. Still, somebody would have taught him to be the warrior, and
Yeah,
I think you have uh, portrayed that it was a lot of influence from Ulupi
yeah.
that had made him into a formidable warrior. So
Yeah.
where did you come about this kind of an equation? What basically made you uh, bring this
Uh,
element into the story?
I think this is mentioned in the Mahabharata that she had a influence over him in one line or two lines, and then I would think in those days influence over him would not just be, especially somebody who's not a mother. It can't be just by words. It should be something more. So, and Ulupi was known to be a warrior. All the princesses, even Chitrangada, and they're all warriors. So, and she being a Naga Kanya also, she had special powers. So, I'm sure she played a part in the upbringing of Babruhana through her warrior skills also. So, that is why I envisioned her that way. Because usually, princes who are very influenced by their mothers would have been in some way been warrior trained also by them, mentally, physically. It could be physically or even mentally, because a mental thing is very important in a warrior. So even those aspects, I would say,
I think
both.
being raised by two women would have made him
Yeah,
mentally much more
that's correct. And
stronger
Chitrangada was
than
a warrior too. Yeah,
and even Arjun was raised by a woman, right? A single mother.
correct.
So there
Yes.
is something that is common between Arjun and Babruan that
I
way,
think a lot of
that they
them were
both were
raised by their mothers those days, because
exactly.
fathers were absentee fathers. So,
Many times, yes. And when
yeah,
they were
correct.
present too often, they made a bad kind of influence also, like Dhritarashtra. So
Correct.
sometimes father being absent became a good thing also for the children. And that
Yeah,
also shows the importance of women and the kind of influence the
that's right.
woman had in
Yeah,
those times, right? I mean, even Satyavati's sons died. It was their Satyavati's daughter-in-laws who would have raised Pandu and Dhritarashtra. So even they were raised by single mothers, to be
correct.
honest. Correct.
And
So a lot of
that's correct. And the women's,
so
whatever
coming
energy they have, positivity or negativity, has a great influence. Even today, I think women are the center of the house. So if we keep
so
our energies positive, we raise good children. So I think that has come from there, from our epics also.
and we see that even in modern life also we see how women influence their children, and
Yes,
they
major,
have
yeah.
a different kind, they bring a different kind of aspect than a father, right?
Yes,
So that both are important, but a mother's role is clearly, our epics have pointed it out, that it is more important than the father's role,
yeah,
by showing us many formidable characters who were raised by single women. And
correct.
that brings us to another question, uh, that is about the widows, the situation of widows in those times, because Ulupi herself was a widow when she decides to marry Arjun, while many would have us believe that the situation of widows was really bad in ancient India and they were burnt at a stake and the whatnot. But if you
Mm,
look at even Ulupi's character, there was nothing like it. She
yeah,
and Arjun was not some kind of a random person. He was probably one of the most eligible male of his time. correct.
Mm.
So not
They can
bachelor
come
per
to
se, but yeah,
bachelor.
most
I mean,
eligible.
for those days it was, I think, they could remarry
Yeah.
many times.
So and I mean, if you can translate that the Brahmacharya Vrat into English, we can probably call him a bachelor for that time when he met Ulupi.
Yeah,
But yeah, he was one of the most eligible males of his time, and she was a widow. And if widow remarriage or if marrying a widow was such a taboo thing, this would not have existed, right? This
yeah,
relationship would not have
yes.
existed, but it does,
It's
and that
clearly
tells us a
mentioned
lot.
in our scriptures that widow remarriage is allowed. Also, if the husband is missing for some reason, like in the case in this book, we have another case where Nala and Damayanti they meet, and then Nala is lost for some reason in the forest, and he is nowhere to be found. So then Damayanti announces Swayamvara. I think she couldn't have announced Swayamvara from her father's kingdom if this wasn't allowed. So it's very clear
Correct.
that remarriage was possible in two cases, widowhood and also if the husband wasn't there. So
So
I think it's
and that
very
shows
clear.
us a very progressive aspect of the society. Even in modern terms, if we talk about it, I think the society in those times was much more progressive when it came to the
Yeah,
aspects of these relationships. They were much more open to accepting various thoughts, various feelings, and various equations. Like in case of an Ulupi, she knew that she would not be living with Arjun, and it was a very short relationship, if I can call it that. And in modern world, we might call it a one night stand probably, but she was okay with
it
it,
was
right?
not that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh, it was a
the
Gandharva
because people
marriage.
have this way
Yeah,
of correlating things, right? कि आज की डेट में क्या हो रहा है versus what would have been an equivalence. So that's what it was clearly not that there was a very consensual marriage between the two. So
yeah,
what do
the
you
Gandharva
have
marriage.
to
It
say
was,
about this?
yeah, the
What does
Gandharva
this tell
marriage
about
only.
Sulupi's character?
Yeah, yeah. I think this also can be easily taken in the wrong way. I think that the women were allowed to choose their partners, and Arjuna, she chose Arjuna for obvious reasons. I think he was one of the most eligible men. Let's not say bachelor, but men, I would say, of those times. So naturally, like nature has this way of choosing the best partner. She was attracted to him, and she took him to his kingdom, and they married with mutual consent in front of her god Mahadeva, or Shiva, whatever we can call him in this story. But she uh, took him as witness and married him. So that's a Gandharva marriage according to the scriptures. So I think they made a conscious decision to marry. This can't be called a one night stand, as it is said in modern days. I would say the people were very aware of what it means to have a union, and the most sacred union was marriage at that time, whatever kind of marriage, Gandharva or the regular marriage, or what other eight other kinds of marriage that were there listed in the epics. The reason is, I think they were aware of the consequences of marrying a partner. It also meant that they were connected deeply in a way that was, it was an unbreakable bond, like they call saats janam ka rishta in Hindi. They say it was that. So they wouldn't go into a relationship without thought, I would say. So they very much knew what they were getting into, and knew the
And
commitment. And in this case, it was Ulupi who chose him, and he was hesitant, and
that's
she convinced him.
that is
So,
what I was coming to about, that in
yeah,
modern days, if a girl proposes to a boy, people probably, I mean, it's always expected from the boy to propose to the girl,
yeah,
and it rarely happens other way around. But when we talk about that, the society probably in those days was much more progressive. Why am I
yeah.
saying probably? It shows that it was, right? In this context also, it was
Even
Ulupi
the
who
Swayamvara context.
proposed to Arjun.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Swayamvara
mean,
also when he
Swamvara
gives it.
context also, right? The
Yeah.
bride was ready. Bride was allowed to choose her husband, and she was
Yes.
allowed to reject or accept. And then there were various conditions, etc., which were to be fulfilled. And even then, the bride had the choice, right? There are even instances where the bride had rejected people, and some people got mad also
Yeah.
for that rejection and
Yes.
created a scene
Wars,
at the
wars
wedding.
on that. Yes.
so so even those things happen, but I think that's the part of the life. But what we need to bring about here is that all these customs live together, and everybody was part of the society. Nobody was just making somebody outcast because of a different custom being followed. For example, in Madra, there was a different custom. You pay the bride price, right? So when Bhishma
Yeah.
went to get Madri married to Pandu, he paid the bride price to the uh, king of Madra, Madri's father. And then there is another kingdom where the father says, "No, my daughter's son will be my heir. You can't take the child with you," and that was also part of the same society. So all these things are there, and they were all accepted. It's not like that
Correct.
they were too rigid about their customs, their rituals. If you don't do X, Y, Z, you are not a Hindu. So that kind of a thing didn't exist then, right? So even in that aspects, the society was very progressive. And as we talked about the situation of widow also, it was much better probably in those times than it is today. And it's
Yeah.
not only Ulupi that we have as an example. There are multiple examples we have even in Mahabharata. So we have the example of Ambika and Ambalika, who Satyavati asked Bhishma to marry. Bhishma did not marry them for a different reason, because he had taken a vow. But that proposal itself was made, shows that it was not a thing that people looked down upon or people did not accept as a society.
Okay.
Now there is
Actually, I
another.
wanted to say one thing here,
Yes.
that when I first wrote this story, I wrote about this widowhood, and then I thought how, I mean, the father accepts this new marriage, that Ulupi
Hmm.
marries Arjuna and all these things. I just wrote it without actually thinking that there is another
Hmm.
possibility that the father may reject. I never thought of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I also, when I was writing the story, I never knew that there were so many misconceptions about women
Hmm.
from this period. So it was when Shiv Kumarji told me that this is a good thing, and you have
Hmm.
highlighted this. I was surprised actually. Oh, that is so obvious. So why are we even debating it?
Yeah.
Was my question. So now I know, of course, that
Yes.
there are many
Yeah, so
misconceptions.
in Mahabharat, they don't make a big
Without
deal of it,
knowing,
right? So
we know it already, that in traditionally these things were accepted, and women were quite progressive at that
correct.
time. They chose their own husband, not worrying about the family. Also, they knew that their family will be fine. Of course, if there are other reasons like the Kanda Dahana, I think that she didn't expect, and that happened later also. So yeah.
Uh, Another question is coming from an audience member. What do you think happened to Ulupi eventually? So we know that after the Babruahan episode, uh, they Ulupi and Chitrangada both come to Hastinapur to live with Arjun, and
Yes.
then after many years of living together, Arjun decides to depart to Himalayas with his brothers and Draupadi. But what do you think happened to Ulupi? What did she do then?
I think I've also highlighted this point in the book, that she goes back to her Naga kingdom. That is what is the ending of the story. So I don't know if this is mentioned in the Mahabharata. I'm not sure, but I took this ending. It is there in some places, but I'm not sure if it is directly from the Mahabharata. But the some other versions have this. The version I used, probably it's not mentioned, but other versions have the mention that she went back to her Naga kingdom. So this is
Another question that has come from another audience member is if you had to write about another remarkable woman from our ancient scriptures, other than Ulupi, of course, who would you have chosen and why?
Actually, my favorite other character other than Iravan and Abhimanyu was Gatotkacha. So I would rate about
Okay.
Hidimba because I think Hidimba's case, her family was not there because Hidimba's brother was killed by Bhima, in which she was an active part also. She encouraged him to kill him because I think otherwise she would die. So she did not have family support, obviously, after that. And even she raised a single mother. And the other point was that she was a Rakshasi, and it was possible that her qualities would be very highlighted in Gatotkacha. I mean, her brother's qualities because they were genetically related. So she had to make sure that he was a good Rakshasa. I think that must have been really hard. So I would say Hidimba.
Yes.
I don't know how
And
it's.
very interesting choice, and I wish that you write about that, because if you think about it, Hidimba raised Ghatotkaч in a very hostile environment. All the, like, if we see on the 14th day, 14th night, what happened when every Rakshas was coming to Duryodhan. Okay, let me fight this guy because we hate him. So Ghatotkaч was hated by his peers, essentially, and
Yes,
despite that, his peers
in the
would have
opposite side.
encouraged him, right? They say, school mein hota na, you have those gangs of kids who do
That's
things,
right.
and
Interesting
in
observation.
that he would have been probably a guy who was not accepted by anyone as a part of the team. He would have probably had a very lonely life growing up.
Yeah,
And Hidimbi also was again raising this child in a hostile environment, fighting against all odds and being alone. Beam was not present to help her against these odds. And that again is quite similar to Bhim being raised by Kunti when everybody was trying to kill Bhim. Right,
yes,
Bhim was poisoned twice. Bhim's charioteer was killed by Duryodhan. So a lot of things, and again the way we drew parallel between Babruan and Arjun, the similar parallel is there between Ghatotkach and Bhim, where, like, you are surrounded by enemies, you are probably the most powerful among your peers. You can probably bully them if you want to. So there is a lot of you say scope to become a bad person, right? You
correct,
can I like, but both Bhim and Ghatotkacha had a very gentle side, which probably whose only source of information is TV serial. They would probably not know Bhim as a gentle person, but he has been shown as a very gentle and caring person. And it is very clear when Draupadi used to
correct.
talk something, what you say,
Reach out to him
like
when
in
in
Kisak
case of
episode, or like the episode when she wanted a particular flower, she would go to Bhim,
yeah.
while she knew that even Arjun was capable of doing whatever Bhim could.
Usually we
But
see the muscle men have the warmest hearts, so you can say that
yeah, so that is
we
true
both.
about Bhim as well as
Um,
Ghatotkach, and
yeah.
he was like,
He
Ghatotkach
inherited
was
that from his
always
father.
there to help them.
That's correct. So he inherited it from the father, I guess. But
Yeah,
I would say that Hidimba molded him very well, and I think a lot of credit should go to him for winning the Mahabharata war also. That was Kacha. So he was
correct.
a very important warrior. So,
Ghatotkach had like, even Iravan had played a very
yeah.
important role
Correct.
in
All
Mahabharata.
of Arjuna's sons, actually.
About it. And there is also a myth very popular about Iravan. I don't know if you have heard about this. There is a myth that before the war, they had chosen that one warrior has to be sacrificed to win the war.
Yes.
And
I've heard
I don't
about
know
this.
where this myth came from, but if you read Mahabharata, Iravan did fight in the war and he won multiple battles. And
Yeah.
his valor is covering
Actually,
the that Iravan story also.
Iravan is a very important character in Tamil Nadu. They have a 18-day festival for him. He's pretty much revered as a god there. So
Hmm.
this I know. He has a big role in the Tamil Mahabharata, I think. So that version. And this there's also a version where he marries Mohini before his
Hmm.
before the battle because he has to
Yes.
get married
He was to
to
die.
attain moksha, because in
Yes.
those days the main aim of every person would be to attain moksha. So they always look at the bigger picture. So with if you haven't gone through the grihastha, they will not get moksha. So he, the day before the battle, since he's still a bachelor, Lord Krishna turns into Mohini and marries him. This is the other story. There are several stories about him, and he's a very interesting
Yes.
character also. Yeah, I
Correct.
enjoyed writing,
And
even though it was very little, and mostly I
I,
wrote
I I
poetry.
hope
I think I enjoyed
I hope more people write about these characters, which are very less talked about, but very interesting, right? We touched
there
upon
is,
Ghatotkaч, we touched
I
upon
think,
Iravan.
Unsung Warrior has a story on
Yes,
Iravan. Yeah,
Iravan, yes, but it is
that's
only
very
about the
nicely written.
battle, right? The
Yes,
unsung valor focused itself on the
battle
18 days
part. Yeah,
and
that's
the unheard battles, or because everybody knows how
yes,
Bhishma died. I mean, that also they know wrong because of the TV serial. But everybody knows how Drone died. Everybody knows how these Salya and all these main
correct.
warrior died. But I mean, there are many warriors like Satyaki, Bhurishrava, Somdat, Bhagdat. I mean, so many of them fighting those battles and being very like they were probably much better warrior than Duryodhan or Shalya, but they fought valiantly. They died valiantly, and not many people know about them. So that is that aspect unsung valor touched upon, but the positive stories that we are talking about, I
Yeah, the
think
many
the story of
versions. I think there are many versions of his.
Ghatotkaч,
Yeah,
yeah, the story of Ghatotkaч would fall in that category. That despite being in that hostile environment, despite being a Rakshas, he turned out very different,
yeah.
and that
He's
was
my
not
favorite
because of his
character too. Yeah.
father's constant influence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
have a
he.
passing mention of him in the story. He's
Yes,
just
you have
I like
mentioned
the three
yes.
characters, Iravan, Abhimanyu, and Ghatotkacha. Very nice, I think.
Yeah, so I
Though,
think we recently
yeah, I
had
think
two books
Babruwan
about
I didn't
Abhimanyu.
connect there, but he is also there in the story. So all the warriors are there.
So I'm saying that there is yes, Abhimanyu is also touched upon in your story. Abhimanyu,
Yeah,
Ghatotkacha, Chiravan, all three try to have some fun. So
yeah.
it's a very light-hearted part of the story
So
that you have,
I just thought
and
it will
I
make
hope
it
people will.
interesting. Various kinds of sections will make the story more interesting.
So basically, again, like telling the positive stories and telling the positive aspects of the life, and in that story, like even Ghatotkaч, Babruahan, Niravan, all these characters basically are the characters who were in situations which were probably not very favorable. Maybe not for Babruan, but others like Iravan and Ghatotkaч. We have this the possibility of them turning wrong or them turning the bad elements, right? But they did
Yes,
not. While on the other hand, you have characters who lived in luxury, who probably did not face any great hardship in life, but constantly complaining about कि oh मेरे साथ बहुत बुरा हुआ, and they turned out bad, right? We have examples in Mahabharata of those characters as well.
yes,
Right? Duryodhan constantly raised as prince, right? He had no hardship, but still he was jealous of somebody else. Karn again did not face any hardship in his life, right? But he was again complaining, though I am the best, I am the best. I want to prove myself the best. So you have both aspects, but I think we have too many people highlighting those characters or talking about the characters which bring in negativity. And that is why it is important for more people to come forward and spread positivity. And this is one point I touched upon when I was talking to Deepak last week, when he mentioned that why he did not choose to write about Draupadi. And I said that should have been the reason to write more about Draupadi, because if somebody is writing a lot of fan fiction, spreading myths and spreading negativity, maybe more authors should create a bigger pile of art, literary work, which talks about positivity and positive
positive
stories.
characters. Yes, yes, yes.
And
That's a
this
great,
is a
yeah,
very interesting element that you are so keen to talk about, and it is something that is very much needed in our society.
yeah.
And on
Yes,
that aspect, I think these characters should be talked about. And you talked about Iravan, Ghatotkaч, Abhimanyu. Maybe you write more about them. We had two books about Abhimanyu recently, right? One was by Deepak, and there was another by Anuja Chandramouli. So people are writing about Abhimanyu these days. So maybe someday, maybe yourself or some
Yeah,
others would write about Ghatotkaч. I think Sai Swarupa had written a book about Mori, so that would have touched upon Ghatotkaч there, but maybe a life of Ghatotkaч also.
yeah,
Uh,
and he has a lot of magic and all these things. So it'd be
that would be
interesting
a
for
fun character
everybody.
for kids.
Correct.
It
Yeah.
would be a very fun character for
Even
kids. So
Iravan, he
maybe
also is a Naga prince, so
correct.
he
He
has
has
some
magic also.
magic.
Correct.
Yes. So there's
And
a lot of
those
scope.
even those battle scenes can be very interesting, can be like filmed in a manner that he's raising snakes and somebody else is Alambush is raiding Garuda and he is getting baffled. And I mean, if you try
Yeah.
to imagine it, it's such a cinematically great
Yes. Correct.
scene that can be created, and
Yeah,
these
that's
two
one
are very
reason I did
interesting
not.
characters.
I focused a little bit on the battle. It was not necessary because Ulupi's role in the actual field would be less. But I chose to focus on that because it's also interesting for the reader. Overall context has to be there. Otherwise, just knowing that she raised him and then there was war and then again Babruana. This is what we see in the Mahabharata text. It won't be enough. I feel the strength of her character is actually in what happens in between more so than what happens the beginning
that
and the end and in between. In
that
between
is
is more
true,
important.
but if you look at the popular narrative, or if you, let's say, go to an independent publisher and present them a manuscript about the kind of story that you have tried to written tried to write, they would probably tell you that you should highlight more on these conflicts, right? Because conflict sells, that's the popular
No,
saying. Maybe they will
actually,
say,
I don't
why?
see any problem with that. We can have more conflicts, but we should be very careful with the handling of the conflict, like I said before. The handling.
So
We see
uh,
many instances like how Krishna handles the conflict. It's very different from how Duryodhana handles the conflict. We
correct.
can just see the difference. One is a person who is very secure, Lord Krishna. I mean, we
Correct.
don't have to take his example. We can take some other example also. There,
Even Arjun.
Yudhishthira, for example, he is a secure person, or it could be any other
Hmm.
character from the Pandavas. They are more secure about themselves and they behave in a different way when compared to Duryodhana, who is always insecure. So I think this is what we
Always
see in the world today also.
threatening
We
to
are,
commit
yeah, that's
threatening to commit suicide.
correct. So security is what once we feel that we are enough for ourselves and we have done enough, we don't need anything more from anybody else or from the situation. Then I think the conflict handling will be totally different. That is what it shows in every part, every story. This shows. So that we should just highlight. I think having conflicts is of no issue at all. It can be a really bad and really bad situations can occur. Really bad things happened in the Sabha also when Draupadi was there, but she handled it. So that is a difference. So I don't
Correct.
know why the reactions are not constant. We should concentrate more on positive reactions. So I think then the story will come out
Correct.
like
Yeah, I mean, one of the aspects of these stories is to teach moral lessons to us, right, the
yeah,
readers,
indirectly.
and that is how moral lessons were taught to us when we were growing up. Like our grandparents or our uncles, aunts, they will tell us these stories, and they will always there will always be a subtle message about who you want to imitate, and who you want to be like, and what are the good or bad qualities about those people. That aspect is getting lost, if I can point that out, that we are more and more growing towards the nuclear family structure, and these storytellers are now probably living in some small town, and the kids are living probably with their parents in some urban setting. They meet very rarely, right? So this exchange of stories is something that is being lost, and that is why it is very important that we keep pushing further and keep spreading these stories through whatever medium is available to us.
That's
So
right.
like you have chosen to write about them, we are creating videos about it, short videos that you can share on mobile phone and all. That is where people are spending most of their time these days. So we decided, okay, let us go there where you are, instead of asking you to come to us, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
not going to happen. So, and schools these days are not focused on telling these stories, these moral lessons. One of the schools I came across recently, and I asked them, "Do you have morning prayers?" The answer I was given that we are secular school, and I was like, then still you can have morning prayers. I mean, even you are sacrificing morning prayers for the fear of somebody coming and saying this is religious thing. But religion is not bad, but today we are actually putting across things as if that if I talk about some religion, I am doing something very bad. This is not right way to think, because religion is used to taught moral values. Right. When we are taught Ramayana, we are told that, see, Ravan, very accomplished guy. He defeated everyone in the three worlds, right? He was the ruler of all the kingdoms, but without a moral compass, see what he gave to his people, right? He almost destroyed his kingdom had it not been for Vibhishan, who literally saved the kingdom. Similarly, if you look at Mahabharata, these are again cautionary tales against greed, against jealousy, against ego. You have Duryodhan, who is constantly jealous of the progress of his cousins. You have Karna, who is so much full of ego. He wants to prove himself better, and in that process, he is ready to kill his own brother. I mean, he knows when he's in the battle that he is his blood brother, right? They have the same mother. And these are cautionary tales that you should not become like them. And that is why it is important that we all make that effort.
yeah.
And we are coming towards the end of this session. So, any concluding words that you want to add to this? And after that, I will announce the next session.
Okay. Uh, I would say that the one thing I wrote in the story was a poet and poetic prose story. This is so we have a mix of poetic style and prose. I wanted to tell about this a little bit before we end. We have a form of storytelling called Harikate. I don't know if you are familiar. This
Hmm.
is a South Indian storytelling, which was there when I was a child. So my first memory of storytelling was from this. So where we had a
Hmm.
dance, drama, and songs, and even musical instruments played in the background while telling stories. And mostly the stories were from our epics. Somebody, a saint or a king or anybody. It could be anybody, or gods from our epics. So these kind of stories were told in this setting. So when I first thought of Mahabharata story, I couldn't imagine without writing a few verses. So I interspersed some poetic verses also in the story, and this also helped me cover the entire story. That was a side effect, that was not my main intention. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. I hope everybody
So it
likes
make
this
it
style.
makes
So
the story very interesting. It helps in the flow of the story, and it's a very interesting way of telling a story and keep the reader engaged. And I would appeal to everyone to buy the book and read the story. It's a beautifully written story that covers the life and journey of Ulupi, a very important character from Mahabharat, which very few people are familiar with. And there are many aspects which most are not familiar with. So it's important that we know about these characters and know about the life and times that our ancient sages or ancient wise people wanted us to follow and become model people what we can become, follow our dharma and understand dharma. So that's about Ulupi. Now let me announce the next session, which would be with Bharti. Bharti again. We were planning to have that session with Bharti earlier, but some tragedy happened in her life, and she had to skip that session. So we will have that session tomorrow. And in this session, we will talk about another remarkable woman from Mahabharata and another remarkable woman from Arjun's life. And she was the guardian of the Nar Narayan legacy, and we will know how tomorrow. So come back to us at 7 p.m. Same place, same time tomorrow with Bharti Venkat, who has written the story of Subhadra in the book Arya, and it will again be a very interesting conversation. And before we conclude, buy the book. I will post the link of Padega India in the description and the comment of this video. So great having you here, Rajni. Thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank you for
writing the
your
story.
time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Great.